All right, Shalom. I'd like to start up saying, Call Halayim La Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Harikah Kodash Ma'amah. Double honors to the elder apostles of Great Millstone, and double honors to our elder apostle as well, her one by Yashar, all down here in the Lions Den camp. Salutations to the Akim that are pushing the truth, sincerity, and truth, and peace and blessing to the men, women, and children. I believe in the name Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. All right, I'm Knocks on by Yashar, all from the Lions of the Yashar camp. And this is another Lions Den spiritual motivation. We're going to start naming them that. Spiritual motivation. It's all about motivating us in the direction of the spirit of Yahweh Shem Shai and helping us to overcome the obstacles in our interpersonal lives that get in the way. All right, Lord, one of the lessons to edify the service purpose for the hopeful elect, the ones who truly believe in the name Yahweh Shem Shai. So, in my last lesson, we talked about the depression and how dangerous the mind can become when it when it is left unchecked, or unoccupied, just left to wander. A person can reach such a low point that every thought that they have about themselves or about others and every thought they had, period, becomes negative, especially about themselves. All right. It says, people begin to believe that they're worthless and that they're nothing, and will nothing will ever change in their life, and you know what I'm saying, and sometimes they feel like even the world will be better without them. um so then you have other thoughts where it gets you, it makes you become the opposite. Instead of feeling like everything's not your fault, everything's your fault. Some you know It'll have you feeling like everybody else is wrong and nobody understands you. You're always right, you know, and things like that. You don't, it'll put you in a place where, yeah, the person could put you in two types of zones, right? There's a zone where you're withdrawn and you don't want to talk to nobody, and and like if somebody's trying to help somebody, it's two different things. That when somebody's trying to help out and ask what's wrong, two things are going to happen when you're in that state of mind. Either A, you're gonna need that confirmation. You want somebody always to ask about you, ask you if something's going on because something is going on. Or B, um, if somebody asks you if everything's all right and what's going on, it's gonna seem like that's an attack. Why? Why are you asking me that? Why does something like look like something wrong? What do you think? Da 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 da. I'll instantly get defensive, right? Um, and then you have the flip side on the other hand, always needed that affirmation or always needed to be checked on, you know. And nothing's wrong with people checking on you to make sure you're okay. That's a good thing, but we cannot use that as a crutch because there become times when nobody's gonna. It's not that nobody cares. It might be everybody might be too busy to check and see what's going on with us. We have to constantly check in on ourselves, and that's where self examination and accountability you know come into play. And accountability begins with self examination. All right. So so but but when you're in a very very low depressed state to the point where you're in a position to where like you want to seek help, you want to tell people how you feel, you know, but it's such a dark place you can't even explain it or describe it. So you instantly push people away, right? You don't even know how to think, you don't know what to think because everything's going to be negative. You don't even want to deal with thoughts anymore. I've been in that position before. Every thought that would come to my mind would be a negative thought. So it's like, fuck it, just stop thinking. Actually, things like, what I'm saying, um, we have to do self examination, but there's a difference, right? Self-examination is very healthy, but self-condemnation and self-examination can look like two very similar things, but they're actually the total opposite. The world teaches self-examination as self-condemnation, you know, but the scriptures teach us self-examination um, as um, exhortation, if that makes sense. So the self-examination. All right, let's go. Let me get the scripture real quick. Let me get the scripture real quick. There's John chapter 3, um, and 19. It says, "And this is the condemnation that light is coming to the world, and men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. For everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds shall be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be manifest, that they are wrought in Yahweh." So, what self-examination does, and according to the spirit of Yahweh Shema Shai, it puts you under a microscope. A Lord shining a light on you, and seeing every speckle of dirt on your garment that he needs to get off. But once he get it, it makes no sense for him just to take it off without showing it to us first. We have to see our faults, and that's where accountability comes into play. The Lord's gonna. Man, I told the younger brothers one day we were getting ready to teach, and I said, be thankful that Yahweh Shema Shai exposes to us our faults, that we may get a true understanding as he works through us and works on us to perfect us, right? So now we'll get an understanding why we're going through the things that we're going through, why we think the things that we think, why we feel the way that we feel, because it's a self-examination. It's an examination being given by Yahweh by Shema Shai. We call it a self-examination, but it's really examination given by Yahweh by Shema Shai according to his standards. So you have self-examination and self-condemnation. One mindset destroys you, the other mindset transforms you. All right. It says because so basically because like Paul, he didn't say condemn yourselves. He said examine yourself because accountability, like people don't like to be held accountable for certain things because they think accountability is an attack on their character. Self-condemnation is an attack on your character, but accountability is not destroying your identity, is about correcting your direction and how you perceive things. So really accountability puts you in the process of renewing your mind. All right, let me get another scripture real quick. First of all, First of all, let's get the definition of accountability before I go any further. All right. It says accountability. Accountability is the obligation or willingness to accept responsibility for actions, decisions, and outcomes. Right. So now, because guess what? Without accountability, you know, without accountability, you might have an issue or a problem, right? You might have an issue or a problem and you're trying to and you're lashing out about it, you're upset about it, it's making you feel these all types of adverse ways, and you might not know that you're the cause of the problem, but you're sitting there pointing the finger at everybody else because you're not able to see what the root of the issue is. And sometimes we get so sucked in our negative thinking that we cannot foresee because the issue could very well be us. See that? All right. So holding ourselves accountable keeps us from creating more issues that we don't need to have because we can get to the root because sometimes we're the root of the issue and we don't understand or know it. All right. It says It means being answerable to others like a boss, the public, or a partner, and taking ownership of both success and failures without making excuses, being able to just accept it. All right. So it says, to fully understand how it works, accountability breaks down into a few distinct concepts. Answerability, the obligation to explain, justify, or report on your actions or performance to someone else, meaning basically explaining why you're acting a certain way. So now, if you are in not such a great mood, right? And you unknowingly your mood is affecting others, and someone comes approaches you and asks you if you're okay, or explains to you that how your behavior is acting and it's making them feel right, you have to hold yourself accountable and at least try to see what that other person is saying. Not a lot of times we like to get defensive and justify or make excuses. You know, transparency, operating in a way that makes your decisions, processes, and results visible and open to evaluation. Right, being open book, being don't let's make somebody and try to interpret what the message is you're kind of trying to convey or whatever it is that's going on. Be open minded, but sometimes it's hard to be open minded or express yourself because we can be so deep in depression. It's possible to be so deep in depression that you don't even know how to explain that. And I want to talk about working on how to do that, to come to terms to do that. All right. It says consequences, the understanding that the results, whether good or bad, will be tied back to you and that you will accept the outcomes of your choices. So if we have accountability, right? We're gonna be mindful of our actions because we're gonna take the butt of the blame or the success at the end of it all. You know, being able to take the good and the bad, right? So these are different types of standards when it comes to accountability. You have workplace, corporate, political, and government. But this is the one I want to talk about: personal and interpersonal. An individual's obligation to be honest, reliable, and trustworthy in their relationships and personal conduct. You have to be because if you're not holding yourself accountable, you're not being trustworthy in any type of friendship, job, workplace, relationship, marriage, nothing. If you don't have some sort of accountability, you are living a false narrative of reality, and you won't be able to even see it. And so when people try to help you, their help is going to seem like antagonizing or an attack, and you're not going to be receptive of it because you're not able to see. And it start being able to see. It starts with accountability. All right. So let's get to because like Romans. What? Let me get it real quick. So so self-examination, right, is a beautiful thing if you can do exactly that, self-examine through the lens of Yahweh Shem Shai. Because self-examination, if you're not looking at it through the correct perspective, can turn into self-condemnation and can turn your mind full of darkness. So we have to be renewed in the way we think and with the way we perceive things because the world taught us to look at things at a certain way. But Yahweh Shem Shai is trying to show us different. Like, no, no, we shouldn't feel these emotions. We shouldn't operate off these emotions. We shouldn't let these emotions destroy our friendship, destroy our lives, destroy our sense of reality because we have our sense of reality is the truth given unto us by Yahweh Shemal Shai. So that self examination is going to get us closer to that and separate us from the world. So we have to cut ourselves off from the flesh. Right? Romans 2 and 12. I mean 12 and 2 it says, and be not conformed to this world, Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of Yahweh Shema Shai. And that starts with accountability. We have to renew our minds, right? And operate and think differently. Think according to the standards of Yahweh Shema Shai. Renewing of the mind. We cannot, when we do self-examination, we cannot do it in the old mind from before, because that old mind was corrupted by the world. So we have to examine ourselves through the mind of Yahweh Shema Shai. The old mind is going to be uh, condemned by trauma, pride, fear. You know, a lot of times when something goes wrong, we automatically blame everybody else from our past as to why we're going through our life the way we're going through it now. I myself, you know, then we start to blame ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Neither one of those are the correct way. So just like um, just like King David said, let me get this. Psalms 139 and 23. Hold on. Psalms 139. Um, that says Psalms 139 and 23. It says, "Search me, O Yahweh, know my heart, try me, know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way of everlasting." See that? That's why we want to be examined through the lens of Yahweh. We want that light to shine upon us so he can correct any type of behavior that we shouldn't have, any type of things going on in our mind that we should have. Like, hold on, let's get this. We have to renew our mind, and we have to examine ourselves through the minds of Yahweh Shem Shai. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse um 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 16. It says, "For who have known the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct them." See that? We just read in Psalms 139 and 24. It says, "And see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way of everlasting." How are we led in the way of everlasting? Through this. It says, "For we have known," 1 Corinthians 2 and 16 again. It says, "For we have known the mind of the Lord, that he may who have known the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct them." Right? But we have the mind of Yahweh Shai Hamashiach, right? And once we start operating on that mindset, and we begin to self-examine ourselves through that lens, through that microscope, right? We're going to be saying things just like how King David said. You know what I'm saying? Um, uh, he said, "Search me, O Yahweh, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts." Those are the things we're going to be saying. That's holding ourselves accountable for anything, because our minds can be deceived, can deceive us. Sometimes will feel like we're innocent when we're guilty, and not necessarily in a right or wrong sense, but sometimes we sit and sulk in a certain way of thinking, in a certain mindset, right? And we blame other people that may have caused trauma in our life, right? And caused us to act in that manner, but really we're at fault because we continued in that, and they're going on about their whole married lives, not giving a fuck about what we have going on, not giving a damn that we're sitting in darkness, affected from what the things that they did to us. But we want to hold them accountable for what they did, but no, we have to hold ourselves accountable for allowing our lives to be conducted or led because of what they did to us. We have to come to the acceptance, like, okay, it happened, they did that, but I must move forward. Because if we don't, we're going to get to the point where we think that we're beyond hope. When Yahweh Bashim Shai has already forgiven us, right? And through our faith, we are made perfect. See that? So with that faith, Yahweh is looking at us through a lens where he sees perfection through his son, Yahweh Shai. So think about this, right? Think about this, right? So now you done moved on with your life, right? Not really moved, you know what I'm saying? You're not around the individuals that used to hurt you in the past. And you got a new set of friends that you develop, right? New set of friends, family, this, that, and the third, uh, colleagues, work, because sometimes shit happens at work that affects us, shit happens in the family that affects us, shit happens in our childhood, all types of things, right? But sometimes we don't notice that we carry those things on like trauma, right? But sometimes people use trauma as a crutch. Um, and there's a difference between because sometimes people use trauma as a provocation. Sometimes people act a certain way. A trauma is like this, right? Boom. All right. Every time, let's just use this for an example. Every time the ice cream man comes around, you would go get ice cream, but there would be a bully in the neighborhood that would beat you up and take your money. 20 years later, you're grown, right? And now you start to get an eerie feeling every time you hear, you know, every time you hear the ice cream truck. You start to get an eerie feeling. You start getting anxious and stuff like that. That's trauma triggering those emotions because you're remembering what's happening in the past, right? But now sometimes people do things to you, right? And you respond to the things that they've done to you, and they say that you're acting off of your trauma. No, that's not the case. That's provocation. Like you have individuals, right? You know, um, they'll do something to you. They'll talk to you in a manner that you don't like to be talked to, right? Um, and you'll be like, hey, yo, you'll go to explain yourself. Somebody that doesn't want to accept accountability, when you explain how they're making you feel, and they try to throw it off on your trauma, that's them deflecting because they don't want to hold themselves accountable for their actions, right? And so if somebody's responding to an individual about how the things that they're doing to them and how it makes them feel, that's not trauma. That's them saying, "Ouch, you hurt me." One thing my uncle told me: if somebody steps on your foot and you don't say "ouch," they might not even know that they stepped on your foot, and they might not even know that they hurt you. So you cannot hold them accountable. You have to hold yourself accountable because you didn't let them know. But when you try to let somebody know and they try to deflect it and say you're operating off their trauma, that's them not wanting to hold themselves accountable for their own actions. So now it's not trauma, it's provocation. They're provoking you, right? It's not even provoking. It's just you're responding to their action, but they don't want to accept it. So now they will gaslight you and make you think that you're the problem, right? And I said that, and I want to bring up a scenario and call it smoke in the room. All right. So imagine walking in a room, and as soon as you open the door, you smell smoke. Immediately you become upset, start yelling and tripping out. You know what I'm saying? Like, who started this? Like, why is there so much smoke in here? It's like, y'all don't smell smoke? You know what I'm saying? Why are you guys always standing around not paying attention when there's smoke in here? So you're blaming everybody in the room, and then you look around the room, right? And you stop just for a second. Then you actually look around the room, and then you notice every single person in the room is carrying a fire extinguisher, right? Nobody has gasoline. Nobody has a lighter. Nobody has anything that could have started the fire. Then you look down in your hand, right? And you're holding a burning match. Suddenly, the whole scenario in the room changes. So now accountability will let you know you're the one that started the fire in the room, and the individuals that had the fire extinguisher were the ones that were putting it out. So now the end result, you see it's a smoke, and you're not upset about the smoke that you see, but you didn't realize you started the fire. That's where accountability comes in. You see that? So it says, so the smoke wasn't coming from everybody else. The smoke came from the individual diffusing the fire that you started, or that the individual with the match in their hand started. You know, so that's where we have to maintain and examine ourselves on a regular basis, right, to make sure we're operating in the spirit. All right. Imagine being in a past relationship. How many times, like as a man, uh, they ask you about, oh, what happened between you and such and such? Oh, so like, what's up between you and such? Oh, we're not together anymore. First thing everybody do, what you do. You see what I'm saying? There's always a blame there, not even understanding what's going on. But you know what I'm saying? But sometimes, like I've been the person in the past that will always, man, she did this, she did that, she made me feel like this, she made me. Well, how did I respond though? Because one thing about it, and two things for sure, no matter how anybody's acting, I have the right to stay within my element and stay within my character and not conduct myself in the same mannerisms that they're doing and blame them for it. Because at the end of the day, I have to hold myself accountable also. See that? Well, that goes back to two wrongs don't make a right. So we got to ask ourselves in certain situations when we see smoke in the room, are we holding the match? So let's go to Matthew chapter 7. I gotta get off here in a minute. Gotta make a run. I didn't want to make this too long. Matthew chapter 7. Um, Matthew 7 and all right. Let's start at verse 1. It said, "Judge not that ye be not judged." That doesn't mean we can't judge anybody, but that merely means that if you out here stealing, you can't be running up to somebody calling them a thief when you out here stealing. That's what that means. But if you're not stealing and you see somebody stealing, you're trying to, hey man, that's not a good look, man. You shouldn't be doing that. You know what I'm saying? You're able to do that because you're judging somebody righteously. All right. Verse 2, it says, "For with what judgment you judge, ye shall be judged." Correct. This is exactly how I just explained it. "And with what measure ye met, it shall be measured unto you." Now, let's get that goes into expectations. How do you measure other people? Because you will be measured according to the same thing. A lot of times people go out here and um and they have certain level of expectations on people that they don't even have for themselves, and they'll start to condemn the other person for not living up to a certain standard that that you they expect them to live up to. So then, is it that person's fault that you know what I'm saying, had a certain level of expectation, or is it your fault for not even understanding and knowing that person and knowing what to expect of them? You know, so understand when we measure certain people a certain way, when we judge them a certain way, we're going to be measured and judged according to the same thing. Um, Verse 3 it says, "And why beholdest thou the mote in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thy own eye?" Right. You're looking at everybody in the room full of smoke, and you're looking at them as the fault of everything, or looking at examining and looking at all their faults, but not even looking at your own. Because if you're able to see it within everybody else that easily, maybe it's because it's within you. But a lot of times we don't like to see it on ourselves. That's why accountability is such a major important thing, especially dealing in mental health, because it gives us an understanding of what we need to focus on. You know, so but once again, self-examination is great, but self-examination can also be misunderstood as self-condemnation. When we get into those states when we're that depressed where we can't even express ourselves on how we feel, we have to retrain the mind according to the mindset of Yahweh Shema Shai. Because if we try to rebuild ourselves off that same mindset that we fell a victim to depression under, we ain't rebuilding nothing but a grave because we're rebuilding that same foundation that tore us down in the beginning. We have to rebuild ourselves according to the foundation of Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shai and according to their thoughts and their ways. We can't rely on our own thoughts. Our own thoughts is what got us in these um, uh, um, emotional, distressful uh, situations in the first place. So we got to make sure that we're uplifting ourselves according to Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shai. All right. Let me get Romans 14:2. Oh, boy. No, that ain't the one I wanted. What's 14:12? Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. So now let's get this. Romans 14:12 says, "So then every one of us shall give account of himself to Yahweh." We might, what I'm saying? Yahweh by Shema Shai gonna hold us accountable, but we're gonna have every man give his own thoughts. Let every man work out his own salvation through fear and trembling. It says, verse 13, it says, let us not therefore judge one another more, but judge this rather that no man put a stumbling block or occasion to a fault in his brother's way. All right. So, because sometimes we can do that, become a burden, become a problem. Like we're judging our brother a certain way, and we're not judging righteously because we're not, what I'm saying, examining ourselves. You know. So let's get Lamentations, Lamentations, Lamentations 3:40. It says, all right, it says, Lamentation 3:40. It says, let us search and try our ways and turn again to the Lord. Right, search. That's what we're searching for. We got to get past the flesh though, because once we try to rebuild our minds, if we stay in a fleshly state of mind, we're going to be rebuilding back into that dead end trap that led us, what I'm saying, astray in the first place. So we have to let me read it again. It says, let us search and try our ways and turn again to the Lord. Let us lift up our heart with our hands unto Yahweh into heaven. So it's gonna what? Take prayer. It's gonna take fasting. It's gonna take faith is the number one thing, man. You got to believe. We have to believe. The world will make us believe ain't no hope. But that's a motherfucking lie. There is hope. There's always hope, and it's no hope for the wicked. It's no hope for the wicked, but it's always hope for us, man. You know, because every one of us has walked in a room full of smoke at some point in life. But the question isn't whether if there's smoke. The question is, are you willing to look and see who's holding the match, even if you might be the one holding it? Because if I'm gonna use myself for an example. If I come into a room and I see smoke everywhere, right, and I'm looking outward first, and I just see the smoke, and I'm just talking about everybody that's in the room. Why is there smoke? If I don't choose to look down or look within myself, I'm not gonna hold myself accountable, and I'm gonna just blame everybody else for the smoke being in the room, not realizing that the smoke is there because of the fire that I set. Because so we have to humble ourselves and allow ourselves to be looked under the microscope of Yahweh Shem Shai, so he may correct us. That's why, like I'll say it again, like I told the brothers, be grateful that the Lord exposes to us our faults so that he can correct us and we can understand what and why he's correcting us and creating us into perfection. He said, I shall make a man more precious than fine gold. That goes for the women too. Our women are important to the Lord. Our women are important to the men. The men are important to the Lord. Vice versa. So the Lord's gonna be dealing with them too. The Lord's gonna be dealing with them too. You know, there's a reason. Like he's grooming and as he's grooming and creating a helpmate in Yahweh by Shema Shai as the man, he's grooming the women the same way to be helpmates for us. So we have to look within ourselves and allow Yahweh by Shema Shai to change and transform us. But if I spend my whole life blaming people who for everything and not holding myself accountable, right? We tend to blame people that did things to us in the past, and that leads us to blame people in the future that are really carrying the fire extinguishers. Because think about it, when you get in a depressed state of mind, a lot of times when people come for help, that help is resented. You don't want that help. That help looks like hurt because sometimes you don't feel like anybody's going to understand. You don't feel like anybody even cares. That's another match right there because now you're rejecting somebody's love that really, really cares about you. You don't even know how you're hurting them. So that's why accountability is a major role in this walk to the kingdom. So even though and the fire will continue to spread until it consumes you. Uh, you know. So let's not make assumptions. Let's not accuse, but before don't point any fingers. You know, like because King David, he ain't point no fingers. You know, King David always held himself accountable. He said, "Try my reins." King David wanted to be perfected. As a matter of fact, we're gonna get that. We're gonna close it out with that. Let's get Psalms 51. Because King David understood he wasn't perfect, but he wanted to be perfected by Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shai. All right. This is Psalms 51 and 1. It says, Have mercy upon me, O Yahweh, according to thy loving kindness, according to the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Right. That's what we want. The Lord's going to forgive us. If we know the creator of the universe has forgiven us, we should also then forgive ourselves. We can't continue to think that we're worthless when that would be calling Yahweh Bashim Al Shai a liar. If we go in the mindset that we're worth nothing, he created us and put us in the temple, right? Inside the temple to be protected from the outside world. So that means we're worth something to him. So we have to look at ourselves through the same lenses that he looks at us through. Because he's cleaning us up for a purpose to be dear unto him. All right. It says, Wash me thoroughly from my iniquities and cleanse me from my sin. Here goes the accountability. For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Right. So we see that. That's where the whole emotional distress comes from. It goes all the way back from when sin was brought into the world. That's what we're really upset about. What we did in the past. Now he's giving us true understanding of why it happened, and he's showing us hope and a way out. He made this happen. There's nothing that can happen on this earth without him doing it. Verse 5, it says, Behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Behold, thou desires truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden parts thou shalt make me to know knowledge. That's why we have to renew the way we think about things, because we'll live a fascist lie because of our emotional distress that we go through. We'll create a false narrative, and we'll run with that because of what we feel, you know. But we have to let the Lord purge all that shit out of our mind, so he could put his thoughts in our mind. We're not going to survive on our own thoughts. Shit, me, we're not, you know. So we got to put truth in our inward parts because the world taught us lies all up to the point that we enter into Yahweh Shai Shai's rest. Right, verse 7, it says, Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. We got to put on our beautiful garment, put on our strength, you know. It says, Make me to hear joy and gladness, right? Because the world made us hear nothing but sorrows, right? In this book was written mourning, lamentations, and woes. Because why? Because of sin, because of our transgressions. That's why. Because of Yahweh's reaction to that, because of him being pissed off. Because without that, you take that out of the way, that's a beautiful book of paradise. So once we get to the end, we get into the promised land. Imagine what that book is going to look like. The peace between Yasharallah and Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai. All right, Psalms 51:8 says, Make me to hear joy and gladness, that the bones which thou hast broken may rejoice. He had to break the bones and mend them back together with the word, all right, so they can be healed stronger. Verse 9, it says, Hide thy face from my sins and blot out my iniquities. If the Lord then did all that, we need to stop looking down on ourselves and start looking up on ourselves, because we become a reflection of Yahweh Shai. So we got to continue to look up. It says, verse 10, Create in me a clean heart. So we got to get rid of that old mind. Oh, Yahweh, and renew a right spirit within me. So when we get into those real sunken places in the mind and our thoughts be like crazy, we have to purge those out and not think in that frame of mind. We have to because the Lord's gonna put a new mindset in us. And once he puts that new mindset in us, when we get to salvation, he's gonna put the laws in our inward parts, and we'll never transgress again. All right. It says, Cast me not away from thy presence, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. All right. So he's going to renew a right spirit within us. And we're going to ask from that point, we're going to ask him, like, don't let me go in that darkness ever again, Lord. Please don't. Now that you've given me this Holy Spirit, please don't take it from me. Verse 12, it says, Restore unto me the joy of thy salvation, and uphold with me that thy free spirit. Boom. And from there, that's us. What did I just from verse 1 all the way to verse 12 we just read? That went into accountability, right? Restructuring of the mind, body, and soul, right? Now standing up on your 2 feet, standing firm, mind standing firm in Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. And then what's this going to lead to? Now you become a reflection of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai, which is going to lead to this. Verse 13, it says, Then will I teach transgressors thy ways, and sinners shall be converted unto thee. Because guess what? Now that we let Yahweh Bashim Al Shai take over, and we're no longer relying on our thoughts, but his thoughts, now we could teach others the same thing. Now we could judge because we're judging according to righteousness. Now we can hold others accountable because we hold ourselves accountable first. See that? But accountability is the first thing to get rid of all these emotional distresses that we put ourselves through. But if it accountability and self-examination can be very dangerous because it can be because self condemnation can disguise itself as accountability. You can have people that be over accountable. They want to say, "Oh, everything's my fault." That's not where you want to be. That's not what I'm trying to get anybody to do. No, but accountability according to the Lord's standards, He's going to expose to us the things that we need to correct, and He's going to correct them. We don't have to do nothing but have faith and walk this journey and follow His lead. That's it. You know. So